Mark Gurman made me nose exhale today because he was just listing in his latest newsletter all of the stuff we should expect with next generation iPhones, all things you've probably heard before, right? He was like, yeah, expect a better battery life, 120 hertz, a smaller notch. And then in the middle of listing all these things, he actually drops a big one that has been wildly requested for a while, but people have been speculating whether or not Apple would go through with it. But in the middle of listing all of this traditional iPhone upgrade stuff, not saying a smaller notch is happening, just that we've gotten used to people saying there would be a smaller notch every single year for the past, 80 years. But in the middle of all that, he just goes, oh yeah, and expect some type of Apple Watch style always on display. This might actually be one of the biggest headlining features of this year's iPhone. So let's begin. So I did a video on an always-on display not too long ago because there's been talk that with the 120Hz LTPO OLED panels being adopted in the iPhones this year, those displays can adjust their refresh rate to go really, really low if you're not doing much on them, and that of course results in them drawing very little power. So the main reason you would add always-on display to something is if you can consume so little energy that it doesn't seem to impede the battery life too much, and on top of that we are supposed to expect fairly substantial battery improvements in this year's iPhones, which is good because iPhone 12 batteries, not so good, and we're just now getting the MagSafe battery pack. I'll probably unbox that in a couple days. But in regards to like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, that's rumored to be the largest physical battery ever inside an iPhone. Plus the A15 chip is likely going to be a bit more power efficient, and 120 hertz might eat into those battery gains a little bit, but I'm sure just like the iPad, you'd be able to turn it off if you don't care about that type of thing. So expect really, really good battery lives this year, which is good because if you're the type of person to be interested in having an always-on display on your phone, then you'll still be able to use your phone like normal, except now the display doesn't completely turn off. But if you remember my video a while back, I have tried them on different Android phones in the past, and I've never really fallen in love with them because to me it feels like there's multiple different steps to go through the unlocking process, because now the phone is already displaying information. So you tap the display, it colors up, and now you gotta unlock it and swipe up again. So it just feels like there's a bit more steps opposed to just the display being all the way off. I can see that and go right away, okay, the display is off, don't need to worry about it. But obviously I'm sure similar to the Apple Watch, the always on display will be optional. So if you don't like having an always on display on your phone, you will be able to turn it off and just preserve that ever so extra battery life there. But on the Apple Watch at least, it does make a pretty noticeable difference for me whether or not the always on display is on or off. But the biggest reason I wanted to pay attention to this leak is because Gurman has a pretty reputable track record, and on top of that we're getting closer to iPhone season, so that's normally when the rumors start becoming more accurate. And also, according to the latest reports, we should not expect any return of Touch ID, which was also a huge requested feature. Lots of people, especially during the pandemic, were hoping next generation iPhones would have, but maybe because of the Apple Watch to unlock thing, or Apple seeing more and more stores and locations open up, they're deciding that Touch ID in the iPhone is not necessary. And the only reason I thought that would have been a good feature to add this year is not really because I like Touch ID. I honestly don't. I think Face ID is way better, and I'd be totally fine never having Touch ID on another Apple device in the future. I know, I hate it that much. But honestly, it's just because I think Apple's gonna need to have some type of marketable feature that average consumers can care about. I don't think the everyday person is going to notice or care about 120 hertz or even the A15 chip or even some slight ultra-wide camera enhancements here and there. All of that stuff is very nerdy, tech community based, where we're excited for that type of thing, and don't get me wrong, I'm super pumped to finally have 120 hertz on my iPhone. I'm really, really hoping that happens this year, almost to the point now where it feels like a confirmation, but that word's overused, so I'm not going to use it. But an always-on display is something I could see Apple actually pitching to everyday consumers. Someone even outside of the tech community can be like, oh, so, when I put the phone to sleep or whatever, it still shows the time or a couple widgets, or if I get a notification or something, it's just in low power mode, very small amount of pixels turn on at a very low brightness level. That's something I could see a lot of people going, okay, I've wanted that on the iPhone for a while, now it has it, maybe this is a good year to upgrade. But what has not been made entirely clear in this report, that I actually would love to pass the question on to you, Gurman did not specify if this is going to be restricted to just the Pro iPhones or if this is going to be available on all of the new iPhones coming out in September. My prediction prediction and my guess is that it's actually just going to be on the Pros. They're going to look at this as an upselling feature because 120 hertz isn't something everyday people care about, but as we saw with the sales of the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max last year, people do care about shiny stainless steel. So if they see something that's shiny and made by Apple, they got to spend the extra money on that one. But no, honestly, it's more so than just the steel. The always on display is a more noticeable, I think more relatable feature that everyday people can see. Oh, okay, so if I spend more money, I get that feature. Because we're almost certain that the entry-level iPhones, the just regular 13 and 13 mini, or 12S, I can't keep saying both every time, those iPhones are not going to be getting 120 hertz, and we're not even really sure if they're going to get LTPO OLED panels, and because of that, I think it means they might not have a variable refresh rate and be able to go to the really, really low power consumption that you need for an always-on display to work. So similar to the Apple Watch SE not having an always-on display and the Series 6 actually having one, I think we might be looking at something similar where the entry-level models, you know, you press the power button, display goes off. That's the darkest of dark modes you can possibly imagine, but if you're willing to be a not broke boy and shell out a little bit extra cash for the Pros, now you get always on, and I definitely see that as being a feature set that Apple is happy to brag about and saying no one else on the market can do it as good as we can, and we have the most efficient displays ever, and that's why we waited so long on this feature and everyone else has had it for years. But I'm curious to see how Apple would try it, how it would integrate with the lock screen, how similar it would look, and how visible and useful the always-on display would be. I haven't used one on an Android phone for quite some time, so I'm willing to give it another shot. Occasionally, I have the always-on display with my Series 6 on if I'm in a situation where I'm not worried about battery life, and it's been nifty here and there, but overall, for very bizarre reasons, I just like looking at my phone with the display off, and the pixels are not wasting any energy, and I often think about how when the iPhone's in my pocket, if it had the always-on display on, it'd probably be wasting energy in the background ever so slightly. Not saying it would tank my battery life, but hopefully A15 chip and whatever is smart enough to recognize when it's in a pocket versus when it's sitting at a desk or something. But do you guys think the always-on display should be a standard feature for the entire lineup, or do you think it makes sense to restrict it to just the Pros? Feel free to let me know. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.